Hello BookTube. Are there book endings I'd change if I could? This video is a response to a video put up by Kevin Tolles, who was himself responded to by Steve Donahue. Steve Donahue in his video selected 4 books, so I will be selecting 4 books whose endings I would change if I could. Now, I'm not entirely sure if the 4 books that I'm selecting, if their endings are just inept or are travesties. So let's get going. First up is The Scar by China Mieville. Now, Steve Donahue in his video dragged Stephen King for his bad endings. I've never really, I don't like Stephen King, and I don't have any books of his in my collection anymore, and that's a whole other story. But I would say China Mieville, as far as I know of, he's never actually managed to stick the landing of an ending in any of his novels either. So, The Scar is the second of the 3 Bosselog novels. The novel is about a woman named Bella's Coldwine, who was romantically involved with the protagonist of Perdido Street Station. After the events of Perdido Street Station, Bella's has found it necessary for herself to flee New Crobuzon, as the government of New Crobuzon is hunting down the various associates of her former lover. So Bella's is fleeing to the colonies to work as a translator. While she's en route, her ship is captured by pirates operating under the aegis of the pirate city-state called Armada, which is a vast conglomeration of pirate ships that have been lashed together to form a motley city-state. Armada is controlled by effectively a town council of pirate captains, the most prominent of which are a pair of lovers called the Lovers. The Lovers are spearheading a project to travel to a wound on the world of Bosselog called the Scar, which was formed by an extra-dimensional empire called the Ghosthead Empire, which centuries or millennia before the Scar takes place invaded Bosselog. And so you would think with the title of The Scar, the goal being to reach the Scar, that the conclusion of the book would be actually going to the Scar. Well, no, that's not what happens. Instead, the climax of the book is a coup in which the other pirate captains and even the Lovers' own crew rebel and decide that they don't want to go to the Scar because they might end up dying. And so the only person who goes to the Scar is one half of the Lovers. And so it just ends on a whimper. And it's a letdown. I think of the 3 Bosselog novels, this one probably has the biggest letdown of the 3. So yeah, if I could change the ending of The Scar, I probably would. Next up is The City of Lost Fortunes by Bryan. This is a more contemporary fantasy set in a post-Katrina New Orleans. It's about a demigod named Jude Roubosson who has the ability to find lost people and items. He is invited to a poker game or sort of a magical poker game called Fortunes, which is played by tarot cards, in which the winning hand is the best narrative for that individual player. And so the game is hosted by the then current luck god of New Orleans, who is a version of the folkloric fox character Reynard the Fox. Other players include the Egyptian god Thoth, Papa Legba, an angel, and a vampire, and Jude himself. The game ultimately ends with several characters being murdered and Jude becoming the fortune god of New Orleans. And the climax is very, very good. But then you have a 2-scene ending where in the first part, Jude's in a restaurant or bar, and he's using his newfound ability to manipulate luck to sort of balance the scales, which I think is a really good ending. But the actual ending, the final scene, is Jude going to Mardi Gras parade and being accosted by several of the companions that he had on this adventure, telling him that they needed his help because Papa Legba is having issues and is Jude's father, or at least one of the candidates for Jude's father. And that conclusion it should have ended at the restaurant or bar. It's how things should have ended. There's enough of room for a sequel, even though Jude doesn't really play much of a role in the actual sequel to City of Lost Fortune. So, anyway, I would have cut the final scene, certainly. Moving on to Radiance by Catherynne and Valente. So this is a weird space opera novel set in a very wildly alternate solar system, in which the planets are much closer together and are pretty much all habitable. What in our reality is Hollywood is actually located on the moon. And the story is about coming to terms with grief. Severin Unk was a documentary filmmaker who disappeared during the filming of her last documentary. Many parts of Radiance is various film treatments centered on her, well, not quite her adopted son, but a young boy who was the sole survivor of this accident. He was taken in by Severin's partner and adopted by him. How he's sort of become a private detective, and he's having to go through various treatments to figure out what happened to Severin. And ultimately there's a conclusion where everyone is gathered at this hotel on Venus, and Poirot style, and then the very final end is Severin and a alien creature called a Callowell sort of watching a movie in, I think it's actually our reality or something, and it's so weird and just doesn't really work. I don't think the ending works at all. Although I don't know how I would improve it. And finally, A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. So this is a space opera about a space empire that's a mashup of the Byzantines and the Aztecs. A young woman named Mahit has been selected to become ambassador to this vast space empire. And one of her remits is to figure out what happened to her predecessor, who seems to have been quite popular with the Tax Colony, this empire's government. And she eventually figures out what happened and ends up getting involved in a coup because there's a succession crisis brewing in the empire. And the conclusion, the climax of the novel is spectacular. It is amazing. But then you have the come down of the ending, and no matter how many times I try to read this book, I never quite understand why Mahit makes the decision she makes at the end. It doesn't make sense. So yeah. So this is another one that I would end if I could, or change if I could. So anyway, BookTube. Those were So those were 4 novels whose endings I would change if I could. Anyway, BookTube, I will see you tomorrow with weekly reads. So till then, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.